Hey there, fictional friends, and welcome to another episode of Fully Booked. I'm Megan.
And I'm Shireen.
And it is the last week of May.
Maytember.
Oy. Oh, man.
Haha, you love me.
This is we're getting things like started on a really interesting note. It's fine. It's the last week, but you can tell when we've like gone through this period where we record a whole bunch of episodes at the same time, because then we're just absurd by the time we get around to the end of things.
So you can bet your bottom dollar that by the last episode of every month, we're just
we
little
sound insane.
Zany.
Yeah, we just sound ridiculous. Yeah. We either have no idea what we're talking about, or we're just laughing the whole way through.
Bit of both.
Yeah, we're just saying things that have no connection whatsoever to what we're talking about.
There's no structure.
We just go off on weird tangents. Yep. It's fine.
It's
okay.
All good. It's our pod.
It is our pod, and that's how we do it over here, apparently. So we're just flying by the seat of our pants. So it's the last week of the month, which means that we're kind of closing up everything to do with historical fiction. And after our extensive Bridgerton coverage from the last few weeks, we are... I guess probably also in the spirit of Bridgerton, of the new season of the show, but also just in the insane popularity that this show has garnered since its release in 2020 was the first season, I believe.
January 2020.
Right. So since that time, just the complete and total, I guess, explosion that's starting to happen of period romance and period, sort of shows and things in general that are kind of movies, shows, books, that are just, coming back into circulation. We've talked about this in previous episodes before where we've talked about things in supernatural stuff, you do werewolves for a bit, and you do vampires for a bit, and you do, other, ghosts and hauntings and stuff for a bit, and then you come back around to something. It's the same thing with romance.
It is. And, right now it's specifically historical romance, and I feel like there's been, a resurgence for the Regency era, which...
Oh, God, yeah, that's a Bridgerton specific
really
thing.
Didn't have much spotlight before Bridgerton.
It all existed.
Oh,
and there are...
Obviously.
Yeah, no, I mean, in the sense that there are, there have been tons of novels written in that period for years and years and years, but it's true that it's just taken off, to another degree, and I think that a lot of stories that maybe, had existed for a while are now getting a new look and getting the opportunity to be sort of repopularized, even though maybe they've been published for a number of years at this point as well. So it's kind of giving people an opportunity for that. Yeah, it's been interesting so far, because I think it's safe to say that Bridgerton happened and the world sort of exploded with Regency. Everything
the costumes.
Well, that's the thing.
Were so beautiful.
But this is how we're winding up with Bridgerton balls and places and all these events.
Bath and Body Works collection.
Oh my God, yeah, that's wild.
Yeah,
all these collaborations that are happening and stuff because that's it. Because we've talked about it with the previous episodes, but because something like Bridgerton takes a real period but makes it sort of fantastical in its way by adding some additional flair to it. I think that's really helped to kind of bring it into the public eye a bit more, because it's also just pleasing to watch. Yep. Right? Mm-hmm. So it's colorful, it's nice, it grabs people's attention, and obviously the story and everything does after that, but sort of from an aesthetic perspective, it's something that grabs people's attention. And I find that Regency is, I think, feasible for an audience a lot of the time in the way that maybe certain earlier periods are not, because the costumes and stuff, are very different, and the way of functioning is very different, but you are able kind of to modernize it to a degree in a way that a modern audience can really still sort of find any kind of common ground with. It's much more difficult when you're looking at medieval or even Victorian era.
And especially if you want to again, to your point, find some level of modernization for it without it seeming completely out there, and watching it and being well, this is ridiculous, and don't get me wrong, when Bridgerton first came out, it was very much they've obviously embellished this a lot.
100%, yeah, of course.
But at the same time, it works. They made the aesthetic work based on, the what am I looking for as words?
We've got some
words as the customs of the time, the way people would dress at the time. It's easier to do, and also with the sets, right?
Yes, true. Yeah.
you know, like everything was it was kind of getting to the point, like what, it was like the turn of the 19th century, wasn't it?
Thereabout, yeah.
So early 1800s. So it's like we were getting into like our more modern time.
It's like a period that we can still find some relation to now.
Whereas like the 13th century, you're like,
Well, that's it. Very, very, so very different. And I think that's it. And I think that, yes, obviously, those sorts of adaptations and things can work, and those sorts of stories can work from a literary perspective, but people don't find the relation.
Yeah, it's hard to connect with it.
Yeah,
right?
it's just more difficult. It's possible, but it is more difficult. So I think that...
Yeah. Unless you're, like, really passionate about, like, history or, like, the specific period that you're watching.
Definitely. But I think so. I think that's given way to a whole rush of stories, and that's it, at the forefront of which are definitely period romances. For sure.
And, like, you can understand why. Like, think of the Harlequin romance novel.
It's just so funny to think that, you know, I don't know, 15 years ago or so, all these Regency romances, all these things, these have existed for ages. But they existed. You would go into a convenience store and they'd have that little rack of books that are $3 each.
It's true. And they all have, like, those really cheesy
And they
covers.
have these, like, red and white covers. And there's always, like, and it's with an illustration of, like, you know, like a woman with like like her boobs popping out of her
but
dress.
You don't see her face.
Like bent over, and this man with like long flowing locks like holding her in his art. Like it's just it's very
very
that like
stereotypical there.
Yeah, that's it. And yes, okay, some of those are from different periods, because like, you know, you'd find some that were very that were based like maybe a little bit earlier, in the sense of like, you know, you'd find the ones, there are a lot of Scottish ones for some reason. I mean, a lot of men in
Outlander.
Like, I know.
It's like a Harlequin novel just on screen.
But just but it's a Harlequin novel with like way fantasy. Much better writing, much better characters. So it's like if you took a Harlequin novel or a Harlequin base story and you made it really good, because you had like a talented author working on it who makes these like really compelling characters, and
it's,
obviously
like, historically accurate in some ways.
In a lot of ways, yes. And it has a really interesting, like, you know, and with just a really interesting sci-fi fantasy twist in terms of like the time travel that's involved in it and stuff. Because I do think, like, obviously it's been like 6 or 7 seasons at this point, so I do think that like Outlander definitely helped with that. But I feel like Outlander existed, or still exists, I should say, in more of a niche for people, in the sense of like you had to be somebody who was drawn to that sort of story already.
And it's also like, think about it, like Outlander is like almost like a double period piece, because it takes place like in the 40s and 50s,
just post World War II,
and then like onwards after that. But also in, and I can't even remember the years.
Shoot.
Like 12, 13, 14.
I'm going to check because it's going to bother me so much. Okay, so yes, Claire's character finds herself transported from 1945 to 1743. So we're talking about 60, 70 years prior to like a Bridgerton era.
Right. And also like in the Scottish Highlands.
Yes.
Where things were a little like rocky at that point.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Politically.
Yes, politically there was a lot of unrest. The wars and things that were occurring at the time, these were things that were actually occurring between the Brits and the Scots during that period as well. So there was a lot of unrest, and there was a lot of dirt and grime that went into it that you don't get in Regency.
And it's also like Regency, like well-to-do, like
yes, high society,
you know, and also you have to remember 60 years between 17 something and 18 something is vastly different from 60 years in modern history as well, right? Like so like Outlander, where was I going with this? Outlander has like this double period piece, and it's also got this fantasy side of it, and it's also got like this Scottish Highlands side of it, and it's a little bit like, to your point, like it's darker and grimier, and it's harder, like the lifestyle is harder.
And the subject matter, the further you get into it, is also more difficult. There's a lot of really, like, a lot of sort of triggering content that occurs throughout the course of the story. I've only seen a few of the seasons, but there's a lot of triggering content that occurs even within the first couple of seasons seasons of the show, and the subject matter is much harsher. You know, there's less of like a sheen over things. It's a lot more realistic in its way, which is funny because it has this whole fantasy element of time travel involved in it. However, the story itself and the beats of plot that take place are much more realistic than in something like a Bridgerton world.
But then you overlay this romance piece, which is, I feel, when you talk like historical like fiction, romance is so easy to layer in here because like the stories are very much about like situations where it feels like it's a lot of like either life and death or like duty or expectations.
There are a lot of stakes involved.
Yeah, there's always a lot of high stakes, or like, you know, like in the Bridgerton world, it's all about like reputation and stuff. And so it's like this whole like, I can't act on my feelings. And so that adds like this additional layer of like, ooh, like romance, will they, won't they, you know?
Yeah.
And so like you watch Outlander, for example, and like the romance between Claire and
oh my God,
Jamie,
my heart.
Just and then when she ends up back in the future,
I know,
and it's like, how can you just expect her to just be like,
and I
yeah,
also,
cool.
Of course there's so much more emotional, and like there's so much emotional investment in that as well, because you also, you know, when you're reasonable about it, you take that step back and you're like, yeah, but Frank was such a good husband as well. He's such a lovely person. He's wonderful,
but he's not her Jamie.
No,
and she's like so in love with him.
I know,
you know?
And it's just, God, it made me like, so sad.
And, you know, when Frank says to her, like, that's it, you have to stop looking for him in the history books and just pretend, like, just put it aside and, like, be my wife now. And she just agrees to it. And I'm like, how are you supposed to do that?
Because, I mean,
like,
at the same
time, like, it's like he never existed almost in her lifetime.
No, that's
right?
it. And it's also, like, God, you feel so terrible because, like, while you you're there and you're like, yeah, but you don't, like, you know, you weren't there and you don't understand, like, the connection that they had. You're also like, yeah, but she was married to Frank first, and he's done nothing to her to warrant her suddenly being out of love with him. Really, if it weren't for this having happened, they would be fine.
Of course,
they would have been fine.
And like, it's not his fault that his like ancestor was a shithead, and they look exactly alike.
Yeah, that's it. And like he really loves her, and it's just it's sad.
Yeah, the whole thing is really sad. And so, like, that's one thing that Outlander does a really good job. But again, they have multiple seasons, multiple books.
But there's just such emotional weight.
There is.
To what's going on.
Whereas in Bridgerton and, like, other, like, period.
Regency type.
And, like, more Harlequin.
Yes,
like, it's a lot more lighthearted, you know, where there's, like, an end in sight, kind of. And so
there's, you know that there's bound to be, no matter what, because the tropes are what the tropes are, there's bound to be much more of a happily ever after for people, whereas something more along the lines of Outlander doesn't, you question often, you're like, is that where we're going with this? Like, is there a happily ever after? I don't know sometimes, you know?
I don't know about Outlander, but like in Bridgerton, you know that there's happily ever afters.
Yeah, that's it. And I can see why that way it appeals to a vast audience, because a lot of people want that out of their content.
Yeah, because like sometimes you want to watch TV and you just kind of want to like check out a little bit.
It's the escapism of it, and it's the escapism in like a positive way as well, because like yes, escapism can be all of it. Like I can watch a slasher and it's escapism for me because it's but it's not like I like in the sense that it's taking me out of like my day to day kind of thing.
Enough.
So it is escapism because it's a film and it's not real, and it's escapism in the same way that something like Bridgerton is escapism. However, obviously, I can understand oftentimes that when people are looking for that escapism, they want something maybe a little bit lighter and a little bit like nicer, in the sense that, you know, they'll have this like happy ending for the characters that they've, come to know and love and grown attached to. So,
well, what's also interesting is that with these period pieces, because it's happening like in history, it gives you that extra layer of escapism, because you're not like, you can't really connect to it in a way of being like, oh yeah, like, you know, like if you read something that's like current events or like sci-fi and you're kind of reading it and in brackets to escape, but you could also be like, oh yeah, shit, these like historical or political issues that are happening right now, like that is, you know, not really escaping me from my current situation. Like I am actually aware of this. Whereas like when it's a period piece, you're like, oh, like that was way back when. That doesn't affect me anymore.
No, that's it.
Like,
this has nothing.
I don't have to worry about this.
Yeah, that's it. And it's the older, I don't know what it is, but I feel like it's like this a lot. Like even with regards to reading like true crime cases and things like that, the older something is, I feel like the less it affects you, which is weird. But like, you know, like you'll read about, that's it, a case from like the early 1800s, and you're like, wow, that's crazy. And like something really fucked up can happen. And you're like, wow, that's crazy. That's terrible. Like whatever it is that occurred. And you're like, whoa, okay. But then you kind of put it away and you compartmentalize it and you're like, it's fine. But then I don't know, like the next day you read something about a case from 1996 and you're like, oh my God. And it stays with you after.
Because you were alive at that point.
Because you were alive. You were around.
You can connect your day or your life at
and
that
like
point.
You're basically like where you were at that point in your life to something horrific that was occurring. That's it, which is something which, you know, I think makes sense, obviously. And that's just why we are able to use, that's it. These periods are just like really good fodder for that escapism that we're looking for. We pick up a book like this and we're like, oh, well, this is set in 1846 or something. And so, you know, whatever it is that I'm like reading about, you're like, you know, like it's just like a fun, interesting thing. And, you know, you get to experience the extra escapism because the time period is different than the one that you're living in now. And so many of the customs and day to day is very different than what we experience and what we have and will experience in our lifetimes, which I think probably lends itself really well to that also.
Yeah. But before we get started, Megan, what's on your nightstand?
Oh my God. It's fine. We're veering off halfway through the episode. Who cares? We're 20 minutes in.
Who cares? That's our last 5 minutes.
No one does care. It's okay. I don't blame you guys. I don't know. I forget how far in. I'm reading A Court of Wings and Ruin, guys. It's the third book in the A Court of Thorns and Roses series, and Shireen's very fucking excited about it. I told her I picked up Fourth Wing the other day, and she was like, ooh.
I'm so excited.
She got really happy about it. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay, cool. Quick ACOTAR tangent. Spoiler alert if you haven't read them and you want to and you don't want to hear anything that I have to say. Elaine is boring, and I don't like her right now.
I was wondering what you were going to say. Yeah. I'm like, what is this spoiler?
That's what I'm going to say right now. Elaine is boring, and I don't understand the love for her at the moment. Maybe I'll get it later, but I sure don't get it now because she's fucking, all she's doing is sitting in her room.
All she does is mope.
And being catatonic, and it's really getting on my nerves. Yes, Nesta is kind of a bitch, but I kind of, I understand her reasoning for things, and at least she's interesting when she's around, so I'm like, okay, well, if she's going to continue to be a bitch, I'm like, well, fuck, at least I'll get something entertaining out of it.
Oh, so, definitely.
Yeah.
Especially with Cassian's reactions to her.
Oh my God, they're so... there's like an early-ish scene after they've gotten back and they need to sit down and have dinner and talk about things, and the description that's given is that basically since the girls were also turned, like they were thrown into the cauldron and came out high fae, basically, when they came out, is that, like, my understanding is that I guess Nesta was like the beautiful one to begin with, but she's like fucking
like 10
stunning
times
now, and apparently she walks in this really nice dress, and Cassian basically looks like he wants to yeet himself out the window, and I was like, oh no.
I know, it's so good. And she's just rancid. Like, she's even
miserable
worse after coming out of the cauldron. Like, she was bad to begin with, and she's even worse now.
Yeah, she's pretty miserable for the time being. And I know that there will be times where she gets that way and then she gets better as time goes on. It's impossible to ignore spoilers about this fucking series at this point, so I know the majority of things that are going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm like, this one it's really interesting so far.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to, like, it's hefty, so I'm looking forward to getting into like the full meat of it too when things really get started, because I feel like it's going to be a pretty crazy one, because everything that I've seen leads me to understand that, like, people quite like this one as well.
Yeah.
And then the fourth one is like a whatever book.
It's kind of like a novella. It's like a Christmas
It's quite
episode.
short. Yeah. It's like a Christmas episode, like a Doctor Who Christmas episode.
Yeah.
And then the fifth one gets into like something totally brand new.
Yeah,
so
Nesta's point of view.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like it's a very different kind of story, which is also understandable. And I'm looking forward to that one. I'm sure some people weren't.
I really enjoyed it, but there's actually a lot of people who were like, I didn't even read it because I don't like Nesta. And I'm like, but you're missing a whole part of the story.
You're missing a whole part of the story. And also, you can not like Nesta as much as you want to, but I think it gives you an extra perspective into her story. And also, Cassian's in it a lot, and everybody likes Cassian.
And
so.
what I really like about, like, the ones after, so the Nesta one and then onwards is that it's not like it's just like a retelling of something that's already happened.
No, we're going to get new stuff.
It's like, it's advancing the story.
Yeah, we're going to get new stuff. And of course, now that there have been, she's basically confirmed that like the later installments that she's going to put out are going to be from Azriel's perspective, Elaine's perspective, to elaborate on their stories a little bit. I don't really care about Elaine's story right now, so we'll like see how that goes. Yeah. I know a lot of people have love for her because she's the soft sister, but to me, she's just the boring one. So
yeah, I think people are just like rooting for her to like pull herself out of things, but I'm just like, ugh, whatever.
Fine, but fuck. Eventually, I'm like I get it for a while, but damn, by the time Farrah gets back, it's already been months. Like, bitch, could you please snap out of it?
Nope.
Oh man, I want to slap her in the face just to get her to like.
Oh, I love this. This is great.
Anyway, side tangent over. So sorry about that. Shireen, did you have anything on your nightstand?
I did. And slight tangent before I go into what's on my nightstand about A Court of Thorns and Roses. I recently discovered that Spotify Premium gives you access to audiobooks.
Yes.
And so this is the first time I'm actually listening to audiobooks. Hello, boomer.
Oh my God, she's so funny. She's like an old lady with stuff. It's so funny. She doesn't have an Instagram. She doesn't have a TikTok. She doesn't know how any of it works. And like I'll send her TikTok sometimes and she's like, it won't play through properly. Or it's like a slideshow and she's like, I can't get it to work because she doesn't have the app.
It's
and I'm
true.
like,
that always happens. God. So she has to keep like a compilation of things. And then every week she comes over and is like, here's your file of TikTok.
I just go into the things that I've liked and I'm able to find them again. Thank fuck. Because if not, I wouldn't be able to share anything with you at all.
Anywho, yeah, so I've been listening to the A Court of Thorns and Roses audiobook, and it's the dramatized version.
That's so funny.
And like this is like the first like air quotes reread that I'm doing.
Yeah.
And the whole time all I can keep thinking is Tamlin, you bitch. Like I just hate him so much. Anyway.
Yeah, those are going to be really interesting things, guys. I know a lot of people seem to think that Tamlin deserves some sort of redemption arc, but I just can't be arsed with it.
He does not deserve it. He's an ass.
Yeah,
if he'd done one asshole thing and then stopped there, but he keeps going.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like every time I kept thinking when he was coming back into the story that he would like redeem himself.
I know. Every time you see him again, you're like, oh great. Okay, and then he does something really shitty and you're like, what the fuck?
What the fuck? Tamlin, you bitch. Anyway, so so don't love Tamlin. But yes, I have finished reading Ruthless Vows, which is the second one to Divine Rivals.
Oh, right, yeah.
I actually liked the second one better than the first one.
Okay.
Because there was obviously less world building.
That's why a lot of the time, especially with fantasy series, there's a thing where it's like, yes, read the first book, obviously, because you need to have all of that context. Yeah. But so often you get into that second when you're like, holy shit. Okay.
Yeah. And like certainly like the first one, Divine Rivals, is a lot more about Iris and Roman, like their love
I was going to say, you've only told me about it once, so I'm not going to remember their names.
I know,
you looked at me like you wanted me to say it, and I was like,
I keep wanting to call him Rowan, but that's not his name, Roman.
I love the name Rowan.
Oh, it's a great name.
I love it.
Yeah. Anyway, so it's more about their love story, but the second one is obviously about their love story, but they're apart because, spoiler alert, sorry, because at the end of the second one, so Iris and Roman have gone off to the front line to be war journalists.
Okay.
And there ends up being an attack. Iris gets away, and Roman gets captured by the other god. So his name's Dakra. I don't know how to say his name.
I don't know. Oh God, that's my favorite thing in fantasy books is that like all the names and pronunciations of random words, you're like fucking, I'm sure I'm saying it completely wrong. I need the author to say it out loud.
Yeah. So he gets captured by him, and basically he spends most of the book not remembering who he is or who Iris is because he's wiped his memories. And Iris is like furiously trying to get back to Roman, trying to figure out like how to get in touch with him and stuff. And how they can like save the world essentially and like end this war. So it's really good. The characters are really lovely, and I like this like old timey like World War I kind of feel that they've got going.
Well, and like you said, the use of typewriters and everything
the use
as
of
well.
Typewriters and magic and stuff, and you get kind of a little bit more character development. So I definitely do recommend. It's only 2 books. You can borrow them.
That's nice. But that's nice sometimes when it's like yes, a series can be great and it can be fun and everything, but it's also really nice sometimes to know, like, oh, it's a duology, so it's just two.
It's two,
and it gives me the whole story. That's it. And, because a lot of the majority, I'd say, of series are at least 3 or more. Most of the time, you get at least a trilogy. If not, you get more.
Well, with fantasy, you're looking more at
5, 6, 8. 8's a pretty round number for fantasy series. Those are like, they're pretty up there, and a lot of them are very similar as well.
Yeah, I mean, 8 to 12 is pretty common.
Oh, yeah, fantasy. Particularly like high fantasy, 10, 12, 13 books, yeah.
I find once you get past 10, you're like, I'm kind of done.
I'm a little like...
like, I personally love fantasy.
And even you hit a point where you're like...
even I'm like, you know what, like... I can do 9.
Yeah, but I think we're good.
We're good.
Eventually. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, sorry we wound up doing this at the end of the episode instead of at the beginning, but we really got right into it, didn't we? Sorry. Anyway, that sort of concludes all of our coverage of historical fantasy. Or historical fantasy, I'm so funny. Historical fiction.
I'm like looking at you, I'm like, huh?
You're like, is that what we just did?
I'm like, where was I?
Yeah, you were like, oh, that's exciting. Anyway, that's the end of Historical Fiction Month, so we'll be coming to you next week with a new theme for the month of June. But until next week, guys, you can check out everything that we have going on over on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads at FullyBookedCA, and our Facebook group, which is at facebook.com/groups/book was way better. But until then, keep on reading.
Thanks, everyone.